Jackson. I'm a panelist here at Ikkicon. This is my first time actually doing this 4Kids panel, so you guys are the guinea pigs. So yeah, this panel is the history of 4Kids, a deep dive into one of the most controversial companies in anime history. But before we really get into 4Kids, let's learn a bit about them. Who were they? Well, 4Kids was a New York-based company who specialized in licensing and dubbing foreign cartoons to children. Hence their name, 4Kids. Their stuff's for kids. The shows they licensed ranged from lighthearted comedies to action shows, often aired on Saturday mornings, which made them one of the few companies at the time to specialize in creating original Saturday morning programming. But what they're really known for are the numerous changes they made to the shows they licensed, and were treating anime as a whole as more of a business. But where did it all start? Let's start from the very beginning. The company we know as 4Kids was originally called Leisure Concepts Inc., or LCI for short. Since its creation in 1970, LCI specialized in pitching ideas to TV networks to start big franchises. But by the 80s, they moved to licensing numerous brands and celebrities for TV to toy sales. Of the company's two co-founders, Mike Jamaican was the artist. He was an animator who worked for Rankin Bass, while Stan Weston was the businessman who made the deals. Through their brand LCI, they had begun making ties to stuff like Star Wars, Thundercats, which those two actually helped create Thundercats, crazy enough, and even had ties with celebrities like Farrah Fawcett of Charlie's Angels fame, licensing her for like merchandising. In 1987, Alfred Kahn, former vice president of marketing at Coleco and known for bringing the Cabbage Patch Kids to mainstream audiences, became chairman of the company. 1987 was also a big year for LCI, as this was when the company made a very big deal with Nintendo. In 1987, LCI would make a deal with the then rising company to help market their consoles and games for North America, specifically the NES and The Legend of Zelda. But this deal also helped the company out in the long run. You'll see why. LCI didn't get its true start until the 90s. First in 91, when Kahn would be appointed as CEO of the company. 92 would see the creation of 4Kids Productions, a subsidiary that focused on making television for children. LCI wanted to get more involved in TV production. But it wasn't until 95 when LCI would change their names to 4Kids Entertainment. Also during this time, the idea for dubbing anime for Western television began to grow. After all, why spend money on making original products when one can just license something already made and cheaply dub it? And in 1997/1998, 4Kids acquired the rights to dub an anime based on a new Nintendo property for the Western market. What was that anime, you may ask? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it was Pokemon. Based on Nintendo's 1996 Game Boy sensation, Pokemon had originally aired in Japan back in 97. 4Kids were going to dub it and air it in 98 via syndicated television, where it didn't reach that big of an audience. While 4Kids were primarily a licensing and dubbing company, they didn't have a channel to their name. So, with the move from syndication to something more mainstream, 4Kids made a deal with the Kids WB, Warner Brothers' Saturday morning blog in 1999, getting the show noticed by a wider audience of kids. The result? Well, how about dozens upon dozens of new seasons, tons of merchandise. We're talking posters, shirts, watches, Burger King toys, and plushies, an album that charted 90 on the Billboard Top 200, trading cards of all the Pokemon, and even a musical stage show that toured across the country. So yeah, calling Pokemon a success would be an understatement. It was a phenomenon at the time, and nobody could escape it. But the success didn't come without some changes. Here comes the main epicenter of how 4Kids got their infamous reputation. See, American shows, especially during this time period, had very strict censorship policies. As such, when anime was brought over and shown for children, a lot of stuff would have to be cut in order to abide by network guidelines. For one thing, the original Japanese intro had to be changed to a new English one, though fans wouldn't complain about Pokemon's new intro, that's for sure. And speaking of music, the soundtracks of all these anime, and even future anime, had to be replaced as well with something more bombastic, little white noise in between. Because as we know, kids can't concentrate without a bunch of screaming, loud noise. Some character names also had to be changed to better suit Western tastes. For instance, Satoshi was changed to Ash Ketchum, while Masashi and Kojiro were changed to Jesse and James. But this is primarily for original characters, as Misty and Brock, who were from the games, kept their localization names. That just goes hand in hand with the next type of changes. No references to Japanese culture. Signs originally written in Japanese were edited to be either rewritten in English or left blank. Meanwhile, food like onigiris were either edited out or referred to as other food items like sandwiches or jelly donuts. Guns couldn't be shown.
Oh my god.
Oh boy.
Guns couldn't be shown, as that would imply harsh violence. Early 4Kids episodes that the Pokemon were more lax about this, like this is actually an episode from the 4Kids dub, but these types of scenes would either be edited out, banned, or censored. No sexual content, or anyone as well. This meant an entire episode with James or fake breasts was banned. And finally, no references to religion or death. So no mentions of heaven or hell, any symbols that resemble crosses were all erased, and the word death would never be used. But none of this stopped the Pokemon hype train. Kids were eating this show up, so 4Kids and Kids WB decided to take the next logical step, a full-on theatrical movie. Pokemon the first movie, released in 1998. This was a widely released theatrical movie, which was unheard of for the time, an anime movie in movie theaters. And while critics didn't particularly care about it, the fans ate it up. Despite some really odd changes to the English version, like making Mewtwo more of an evil overlord, and changing the original's Aesop to one where it's like, shouldn't fight, fighting is bad, and a franchise all about fighting. Nevertheless, the first movie would go on to gross an insane amount of money. When adjusted for inflation, this movie is the highest grossing anime movie in America, and would set the stage for future theatrical anime movies to come. The success of Pokemon allowed 4Kids to continue their partnership with Kids WB, resulting in not only more theatrical released Pokemon movies, like Pokemon 2000 and Pokemon 3 the movie, but also licensing and distribution of another anime series, one that would have a very lasting impact on 4Kids as a company.
Jelly donut.
Just wait till they get to.
That opening song is bomb. In a good way.
Yeah, this is classic.
Yes, it is Yu-Gi-Oh! Originally aired in 1999 on Japanese television, the show was based on the manga series by Kazuki Takahashi. Yu-Gi-Oh! Would eventually air on US television in 2001 on Kids WB, but not without some changes, of course. Such neat changes include no guns being allowed. They were instead digitally erased, resulting in characters now pointing at each other while making threatening remarks. Also, no alcohol. Instead, Pegasus here drank fruit juice with his cheese. But the most interesting change of all came in the form of the Shadow Realm.
Yeah.
You see, when you die or lose a Shadow game in 4Kids Yu-Gi-Oh!, you don't actually killed. Instead, your soul is banished to the Shadow Realm, an eternal prison that's basically hell. There's an obvious way to write about very graphic deaths, like a person who got his limbs chopped off would instead be replaced with his soul being banished to the realm. The concept of the Shadow Realm was somewhat based on the world of darkness from the original version. though for some reason, one soul can be retrieved from the Shadow Realm, which makes some events kind of lose their impact. But with that said, while some of the changes made to the series, while eyebrow-raising in parts, were actually kind of beneficial to the show's popularity in the West. I'm serious, I say that. Some of the stories made a bit simple and concise, which, yeah, could be because of the new target audience of kids, but also made the story a bit more, flow a bit better in parts. For instance, Pegasus' motivation in the original Japanese version is to see the hologram of Cece's life, and he needs Yugi's Millennium Puzzle in order to make that happen. This makes sense in the original manga, but the anime has him act as the boss of a hologram company, which led some plot holes, so 4Kids decided to change it up a bit. Pegasus now wants Yugi's Millennium Puzzle in order to open up a portal to the spirit realm in order to transfer his wife's soul to a robot body. This ultimately made Pegasus' story arc more endearing and comprehensive, and the changes also fit Pegasus' character, who Pegasus, because you don't know, is a brilliant egomaniac who would rather manipulate things to his liking to get what he wants, when he could just ask Yugi for the Millennium Puzzle. We also got some classic lines from the dub, such as "Believe in the heart of the cards," and for some, characters also gained accents. Jonichi, aka Joey, got Brooklyn accents to better reflect Giant Buck's personality. And for some, the cheesiness of the dub fit the goofy tone of the show, which, to be fair, is about card games being taken very seriously. And it also helps that the anime itself, even its original Japanese version, is a lot tamer compared to the original manga, which gets really weird and really dark in some parts. The result of all this was 4Kids' second flagship franchise. The show is a ratings hit on Kids WB, which resulted in much more merchandise. We're talking own your own Millennium Puzzle, or maybe you want your own dual disc launcher. Or if you're boring, how about a shirt? Or how about, your own set of cards? Yes, like Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Card sales skyrocketed once the series reached the West. Even better considering cards play a massive part in the series. But despite the success, Yu-Gi-Oh! Would be 4Kids' last big collaboration with Kids WB, as it would set its sights on a different network, mainly Fox. In 2001, the Fox Channel's kids block, Fox Kids, sold its assets to the Walt Disney Company. Not the last time something Fox related to be sold to Disney, that's for sure. So in 2002, after the deal was finalized, Fox partnered with 4Kids to create the new blog, the Fox Box, which is a new Saturday morning blog on Fox run by 4Kids. The new blog was ultimately created after a deal 4Kids made with Fox. Under Fox's eye, any shows 4Kids were licensed would have to abide by the network's strict censorship guidelines. But in return, 4Kids got 100% of the advertising revenue and were given full control over the shows the blog aired. Now, speaking of strict guidelines and creative freedom, let's finally discuss in full detail the one major thing 4Kids was known for. Now, I touched upon this a bit earlier, but why all these changes? Kids could tolerate guns, alcohol references, violence, and more, so why the changes? Well, it's a bit complicated. What Japanese TV can get away with is much different than what US television can get away with. And networks have very strict rules on what shows can get away with on Saturday mornings when kids are more likely to watch TV. So anything considered offensive by the networks wouldn't air unless it was re-edited. And shows also had to have a lesson learned at the end. With Fox and Kids WB in charge, they had very strict guidelines for 4Kids to follow regarding what they're allowed to air on morning television. 4Kids had to regularly send scripts and footage to network executives for approval, and if it's sent back, that means not enough has changed. And if that wasn't enough, the Americanization of anime, with the whole cutting out text and whatnot, was actually a rule set by the original Japanese companies in order to make sure this shows reach a global audience. The companies would request all Japanese text to be removed, and for the food to be erased as well, so that these shows can have a broader appeal. So with all this out of the way, let's dig into 4Kids' first big show on the Fox Box, another Nintendo anime based on one of the most popular characters, namely Kirby. Kirby Right Back At Ya, which originally aired in 2001 in Japan under the title Kirby of the Stars, is based on another Nintendo's iconic creations and would air in 2002 on the Fox Box. Now, since Kirby games are targeted towards kids, the anime was as well. This actually helped since 4Kids didn't need to do many edits. But to get specific, King Dedede's realistically painted tank was changed to one that matched his color scheme. And Dedede's chainsaw in one episode was changed to a laser chainsaw.
Hallelujah.
It was pretty badass. But like Yu-Gi-Oh!, some of the changes made would enhance the show. Characters were given unique accents, for instance. Dedede was given a Southern Foghorn Leghorn accent, and Meta Knight, I guess because he had a sword, was given an Antonio Banderas impression. because now he's Zorro. Episodes were also given better pacing in order to fit with American TV time limits. And finally, Hobgoblin. Just Hobgoblin. One of the greatest names for what was originally a nameless move. The results were pretty good. While Kirby wasn't a huge moneymaker like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon, it still introduced lots of children to the Kirby series, and still has a dedicated following to this day. And the show is still a hit, lasting the full 4 seasons. But now it's onward to 4Kids' next show. How do you guys feel about wrestling? Because we're talking about Ultimate Muscle.
I never heard of it.
Ultimate Muscle was originally a sequel series to the anime Kinnikuman, and previously titled Kinnikuman Nisei in Japan. The show, about the mightiest of wrestlers, aired in both Japan and the States in 2002. Now, one thing I haven't brought up at this point, but it should be obvious to some, the writers of 4Kids love puns. Like, they really love puns. And the series reflects that love so very much. While Kinnikuman Montaro's name would be changed to Kid Muscle, others would be changed to be something more wackier. For instance, Terry the Kid would be renamed to Terry the Grand Canyon, and the best to come of this, was Gazelle Man, whose name was changed to Dick Dick Van Dyke. Which is a stroke of genius. Okay, so when it comes to actual changes, there actually weren't a whole lot. While the show's violent, I mean, it's about wrestling, stuff like headbutts would be cut out, as kids could potentially imitate those moves. And of course, all blood was erased as well. Cultural jokes that reference Japanese pop culture would be rewritten as would prevent confusion among Western audiences. But fascinatingly enough, a majority of adult jokes in the original version were not only kept in, they were more added as well. For instance, there's a scene where Kid Muscle talking to his lady friend Roxanne, and he's like, "Oh, you bring your 3 friends? We can have a foursome for golf." I still don't know how they got away with that. But the show proved to be more popular over here in the States than in Japan, mainly for having a dub that fit with the show's goofy tone, which led to 4Kids commissioning a second final season of the show. Now let's switch gears a bit. Every once in a while, 4Kids would actually try to create their own shows. It was a rare practice, but the next show would be one done in-house and based on a popular 80s property, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh yeah!
Which is 4Kids' first in-house animated show. Aired in 2003, the series adhered more closely to the original Turtles comics that were published by Mirage, as opposed to the 1987 cartoon that did its own thing. As such, this show is a darker take on the Turtles, and deals with continuity, plus a lot more themes of death. Now, while the show is still lighter than the original Mirage comics, which contain heavy swearing, gore, and more, it still put the original 87 cartoon to shame. We're talking about the character Baxter Stockman, recounting how he was slowly torn apart limb from limb until there was nothing left but a brain. And one episode dealt with literally Cthulhu, who corrupts people into wiping out entire civilizations who won't submit to its whim. But it really doesn't get any darker than the Shredder, who is way more of a threatening villain here than in any Turtles media before or after. Here, Shredder is an alien named Shrell, known for causing wars on several planets and behind thousands of deaths. Upon arriving to Earth, Shredder engages in other acts like slave labor, an attempt to kill millions of people, and also child abuse regarding his daughter Karai. And let's not forget, same as it never was, the darkest episode of not only this series, but the entire Turtles franchise. The episode presents a future where Shredder won, which leads to the enslavement of the human race, concentration camps, Michelangelo, the turtle missing an arm, the visual graves of several characters, and even the on-screen deaths of the Ninja Turtles, all in a very bleak, moody tone that makes it the most depressing episode of the series. Granted, the episode ends on a happy note, but still. This, plus good animation and characterization, led the series to become a hit. And while there are some fans of the original 80s cartoon that denounced the show as too different, that has stopped the show from getting some pretty sweet video games. Plus, 3 more seasons, which continued the hot streak the first season started, with new characters and higher stakes. Until season 5, that is. Fast forward, with season 2 jump into the future, the fight crime with Casey and April's great-grandson didn't go well with fans due to a shift in art style and a more lighthearted tone. The series would conclude with Back to the Sewer, which is a bit of a whimper. But thankfully, the series would go out with a major bang in 2009 with Turtles Forever. A crossover with the 2003 and 87 Turtles that explored the idea of a Turtles multiverse. After that, the TMNT license would be sold to Nickelodeon, meaning all Ninja Turtle shows would permanently air on that channel instead, and thus sent 4Kids to TMNT. Now, 4Kids would continue their success with another video game-based anime, this time from Sega. Sonic X. Based on one of Sega's popular franchises that isn't Yakuza or the Football Manager series, the show was produced by TMS Entertainment and aired in 2003 in both Japan and the States. But despite the fact that the games were aimed at kids, that didn't prevent 4 kids from having to make some changes. First off, all traces of alcohol were removed. For instance, a guy holding a bottle of wine was changed to him holding a salami. Every bit of cleavage was erased, so Bruce the Bat no longer has boobs. Any shred of blood or serious violence was taken out. And while guns appear, they now make pew 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 noises. Also, death is handled a bit oddly. When an anime adapted the story of Sonic Adventure 2, the character Maria died the same way she does in the game. But the dub changed it so that she was instead captured by a gun instead of shot by a gun. And an episode of the 3rd season, Shadow the Hedgehog meets a human named Molly, who dies at the end of her debut episode. In the dub, Molly's death is edited out, so she just disappears, vanishes without a trace. Apparently, according to Shadow, she went back to her home planet. Yeah, they pulled a poochie.
They pulled a poochie.
But the result of all this? Well, the show is heavily marketed by 4 kids, which led it to dominate in the ratings department to the point where, similar to Ultimate Muscle, 4 kids commissioned a 3rd season to TMS. We also got a comic book adaptation, which, if nothing else, gave us Luchador Eggman. But the show, especially the 4 kids version, proved contentious amongst the already contentious Sonic fan base. We divided over everything: the voice acting, the voice casting, the edits, and the character of Chris Thorndike, who took up more screen time than the titular Hedgehog. However, this didn't stop Sega from making the decision to replace their current cast for the games with the 4 kids cast. I guess it never made sense to have the anime share the game's voice cast. And what was the new cast's first official Sonic game? Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, Shadow the Hedgehog is a dark, edgy game that has guns, swearing, and a wide abundance of death. Yeah. So let's move on to our next 4 kids show, which is actually a pretty cool one. This one is Shaman King. Originally aired in 2001 on Japanese television, Shaman King was based on Hiroyuki Takei's manga, but the show would eventually air on the Fox Box in 2003. But when it came to changes, 4 kids opted for a more pragmatic dub that exercised as much non-kid-friendly content as they could, while still keeping the tone and themes of the show intact. Though one of the weirder changes was the spirit Chuck being renamed the Baby Chuck, and his guns replaced by rattles that fired lasers. But that said, it's surprising how much 4 kids kept in. Because the show revolved around the use of ghosts and spirits, instead of Pokemon, you got spirits, 4 kids didn't censor any references to death, as it would have been extremely difficult. Some of the characters' dark backstories were also kept, like the character Johann Faust III, whose backstory involved his girlfriend getting shot by a burglar and delving into necromancy to resurrect her. Granted, they never called it necromancy, but still, the motive is present.
Is this history of 4 kids?
Yes.
Finally! You're in the other panel, they're talking about Minecraft. I'm like, this doesn't look like history of 4 kids. Like, this is what happens when you order the panel on Wish.
Sorry about that. Yeah, you monked the monkey's paw. Okay, so all changes aside, Baby Chuck aside, Shaman King remains one of 4 kids' more celebratory dubs, receiving praise for retaining the dark tone of the original series, which helped it stand out from their other dubs. And the dub cast themselves also received praise. And when a new Shaman King series emerged 20 years later, this year, they got as much of the dub cast as they could to reprise their roles. But sadly, not everyone was celebrating. The show's darker tone caused the attention of several moral guardians, who objected to the show's themes of death and violence as too disturbing for kids. And while the show wasn't able to end with all its episodes dubbed, this would be the last show by 4 kids to get away with this much dark content.
Womp
What show
womp.
again?
Shaman King. Okay, so, who likes crossovers?
I do.
I got it.
Good, 4 kids does, because now it's time for the fight for the Fox Box.
What?
Never heard of this? Well,
No.
consider yourself lucky. Fight for the Fox Box was a TV movie that aired in 2003.
Oh, look, I didn't hear that good.
And while I say it's a crossover, it's actually an unofficial one between most of 4 kids' current shows. If you want to call it a plot, the plot involves a person known as The Voice, who is taking over the Fox Box. The Voice has several villains, such as Dr. Eggman, King Dedede, and the Shredder, as well as other villains, keep guard the codes meant to save the block. So it's up to our Foxbox heroes like Sonic and the Ninja Turtles to retrieve the codes and save the Foxbox. Now, if this didn't sound obvious enough, the entire movie is nothing but an advertisement for 4Kids' shows. Like, there's a scene where Mikey tells his brothers, "Hey, did you remember to record Shaman King?" And the animation for this, it's basically a YouTube poof made of stock footage and new dialogue. And then they go on to recap the entire series. Subtle, ain't it? So rather than an ending, the movie concludes properly with this. Okay, so the deal with the movie was, in order to get the ultimate experience, you have to pay attention to the Foxbox codes. During parts of the movie, the codes would appear on screen for people to write down. Those codes would be inputted into the Save the Foxbox website, where the reward for all your hard work was nothing. Just a simple, you did it, and that's it.
I've never heard of this.
Okay, so this aside, 4Kids will later have plenty of new stuff coming out, including
Who
one.
cares about that?
So 4Kids would later, after this, get one of the biggest moneymakers, the Winx Club. Winx Club was a series from Italy that aired in 2004 on both Italian and English TV, created by, sorry if I butchered this, Iginio Straffi? Straffi, thank you. The series tells the tale of a group of magical women. The story is filled with multiple layers that explore the transition from adolescence to adulthood. Or at least, that's how it originally was. Once 4Kids got their hands on it, a whole bunch of changes ensued.
Oh boy.
To start, there's now barely any continuity. Plot points in the original Italian version were dropped to make things more simpler, like how some characters aren't related to each other now. No blood or serious violence can be shown. Any trace of Italian culture will be wiped out.
What?
No.
Oh god.
No pasta.
No meatballs, no pasta, no pizza, nothing.
What do they call a pizza? Like a donut?
The main characters. So the main characters were originally college students, but to better relate to the intended younger target audience of little girls, the characters now became high school students.
They were all of age.
Oh.
And all these changes were done without the original creators' involvement.
That's genocide.
Sorry.
So the result was a series that dubbed the first 3 episodes and was promptly concluded. But Staffy himself wasn't a fan of the changes, and would go on to say 4Kids' edits removed something essential. The license for 4Kids, the license for Winx Club would be revoked from 4Kids in 2009 and sold, once again, to Nickelodeon, who are the current rights holders and air new seasons of the show. Now let's head into the next 4Kids show, another Nintendo one no less, F-Zero GPX.
Yep.
Originally aired in Japan in 2003 under the title F-Zero Falcon Densetsu, the show is based on Nintendo's cult classic racing game series, or for everyone else, that one guy from Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
The guy in the Falcon Punch. But the show wouldn't air in the US until 2004. Okay, so this show is kind of weird. I'm not going to go into depth with the changes. Firstly, the show itself wasn't all that faithful to the original video games, which resulted in a mixed and negative reception from fans. Unlike other 4Kids dubs of Nintendo games, anime like Pokemon or Kirby, in fact, this, as well as poor ratings, led the dub to getting canceled. 15 episodes into his 51-episode run. And according to Captain Falcon's English voice actor, David Wills, all 51 episodes were dubbed, but the rest can never be seen. This also meant the show never got a DVD release, and most of the episodes are lost media.
That's depressing.
Combined with a heaping bunch of poor license games in Japan, the anime also spelled the death knell of the F-Zero franchise, as nothing new has come from the series since 2004. Sadly, the show being cut short also meant Western viewers were denied the greatest scene in anime history.
There's also a game based on this anime too.
Oh wow.
Galaxy. Okay, so here's waiting for more movies. Although 20 years mentioned that, good sir, because in the summer of 2004, 4Kids released their first non-Pokemon related movie, Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie. Yu-Gi-Oh! Pyramid of Light. Hope you heard. This was released in 2004, and okay, side tangent. According to the trailer, they gave out cards to people who saw the movie in theaters. Who went to see it in theaters? Way back in the day. Did you guys get cards?
Yes. You did.
Yes.
Oh, cool.
I know people who did.
Were they just like random cards or what?
You got cards like
There's limited time. But, okay, so the movie was meant to be a grand adventure with Yugi and friends. But the film was destroyed by critics who were appealing only to fans of the series. And while fans did enjoy it for the most part, that didn't prevent the movie from becoming a flop at the box office, unlike the early Pokemon movies. This led to this movie being the final movie 4Kids and Kids WB would put out in theaters.
Yu-Gi-Oh! Only has 3 movies.
But this would ultimately be the start of 4Kids' downfall, because at this point, we approached a crossroads, where 4Kids and their reputation would never be the same again. And it can all be traced back to this one show. Brace yourselves.
This song actually made me want to watch One Piece.
Oh, it is good intro. That's a One Piece.
No, I love this song. If we got this before we got the Funimation job, wouldn't this count as the original for us? The Funimation job, we just happy to Dragon Ball voices.
One Piece, ladies and gentlemen. Originally aired in 1999, and based on Eiichiro Oda's still ongoing manga. The show was produced and animated by the fine folks at Toei, and it wouldn't be until 2004 when the show aired in the States. But if there's one thing no one can avoid talking about when bringing up 4Kids One Piece, it is the changes.
Yes.
Honestly, it'll be easy to say what hasn't been changed. We could be here all day discussing them. Now, I'm assuming that after Shaman King was considered too dark for kids, 4Kids decided to double down on the usual bouts of censorship with regards to One Piece. So in addition to the obvious stuff like no smoking, no alcohol involved, support Sanji now as a live pop addiction, No guns or any other weapons were allowed. They would change to water guns.
Oh, no.
And anything that looked a bit racist was given a Photoshop treatment. Like the guy was really black, now he's white. He's like Michael Jackson. Now, while one could potentially still watch the show despite these ridiculous decisions, the worst thing the 4Kids dub did was make so many changes that it made the plot incomprehensible. Because One Piece is a more adult show, so stuff like bloody violence and death were part of the plot, and they're pirates after all. But the stuff 4Kids changed really fit its story. One example being Luffy's fight with Crocodile. The original version had Luffy using his own blood to beat Crocodile in a fight, since Croc's made of sand and Luffy needs some liquid to fight him. 4Kids edited out the blood, and now Luffy's able to beat this supposedly tough character rather easily. The whale Laboon is cut out and replaced with an iceberg that's taken down swiftly in one episode, which, had they kept going, the appearance of Dead Bones Brooks' appearance would have left a lot of plot holes, because his backstory is tied to Laboon. And finally, entire chunks of story were deleted, like the Little Garden arc, probably because it would have been harder to censor the violence. In a show as dark as One Piece, where death was often commonplace, 4Kids was still not allowed to make any serious references to mortality. While people could still die, it was often off screen, and the word die could never be spoken. And there were many times where a character's death was altered to something honestly much crueler in an attempt to preserve the rule. For instance, Nami's backstory revolved around seeing her mother getting shot in front of her. It's pretty dark, right? 4Kids changed it instead. Yeah, now he's pointing at her. 4Kids pointing at you. So 4Kids changed it instead, have Nami's mother sentenced to spend the rest of her life in a dungeon where she starved to death.
Oh my god.
As long as she doesn't get shot, it's okay. So, you're probably wondering how did 4Kids get this show? Why did they do this? So 4Kids were in the middle of a deal with Toei to acquire the right to Ultimate Muscle and Magical Dorei Mi. It's here where Toei made a deal with them. They get those two shows, they'll dub One Piece. This is actually a common practice for anime dubbing. For instance, this is how EDB Films acquired the rights to Ghost Story. Toei had wanted a company that could dub One Piece, expose it to a worldwide audience. But funnily enough, one of the first companies to approach them was Funimation. But Toei thought they were too expensive, and Funimation couldn't guarantee the show would air on television. So a desperate Toei decided to make the deal with 4Kids. Because after all, if 4Kids could help boost the popularity of stuff like Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh!, they could do it with One Piece. So 4Kids agreed to the deal, despite having never seen a single episode of One Piece. And once 4Kids did sit down and watch the first couple episodes, they were horrified at what they saw. The show was way too dark for them to dub. Now it's like a show they knew had no chance of being good once it went through the inevitable amounts of cuts and edits that would air on Saturday mornings. And they were also forced to respond to both Toei and Fox's constant meddling. So 4Kids ultimately decided to say, screw it. They put very little effort into the show's dub until the license ran out. But while that might have been okay for an obscure and crappy show, like Ghost Story, this was different. One Piece was insanely popular in Japan and had a cult following in the West even before it was exported here. And the results speak for themselves. Fans of One Piece despise the dub for its casting, writing, and changes to the source material that made the show a mess. By the time 4Kids version ended, the first 144 episodes had been edited down to 104.
Yay, no filler.
But once the license expired, Toonami would go on to air the show. But the show would later be picked up by Funimation and given proper treatment. But the ones who hated the dub more were 4Kids itself. Former executive Mark Kirk would describe the show as the worst thing 4Kids have done, while the voice of Sanji, David Moo, who gave the suave-faced man the nasally Brooklyn accent, disagreed with the direction he was given, and the role literally killed his career. The show would only boost the amount of derision that 4Kids had garnered over the years, and send their reputation to rock bottom. But it's here where I pose a question. Why the extreme hate for 4Kids? I mean, after all, they're not the only ones to do this. Sailor Moon Star was infamous for featuring a lesbian couple and their cousins, who occasionally made out, while Outlaw Star suffered numerous edits on Toonami, owed to a sense of nudity, violence, or even poker games. Even Escaflowne was, when it debuted on Fox Kids, was heavily mangled and edited for a variety of stupid reasons. Like the entire first episode being deleted just because it focused on the female protagonist, and Fox wanted a boy show that was canceled 10 episodes in. And if you want to go further, this stuff dated back to the 1970s with stuff like Robotech. So, where did this all start? Why 4Kids specifically? Well, it all started with donuts. Kinda. One reason was that companies at this time, like Funimation and Viz, releasing anime like Dragon Ball Z and Naruto, not only on TV, but also uncut on DVD. So, anime purists who want to watch their favorite shows dubbed or subbed could, for the most part, allow these companies to handle their favorite shows with respect. But the second and ultimate reason, what started on the internet, while the World Wide Web was a thing for a while, it wasn't until the late 90s and early 2000s when the net was starting to grow in size. Just about anybody can create whatever they wanted. From websites to games, videos, the sky is the limit. There was also a source of constant mockery. Now, fan subs, a practice having gone back since the 1980s, will start making the rounds on the internet. Thanks to a wider range of connectivity, anime fans were able to download recordings from Japanese television, translate them, and share them on the internet for all to see. Heck, in some cases, fan subs are the only way to view certain anime that still hasn't received an official English release. And while fan subs have their issues, actually a lot of issues,
What are you talking about?
No, I saw that.
a lot of issues.
Something. You
Fans have still provided Western audiences a chance to compare the change between their favorite anime to the televised Western versions. This resulted in people dismissing the idea of making change to their favorite anime, which is understandable. Most of the people don't like seeing their favorite property neutered in ways that ruin the story, characters, and the perception of the show amongst the masses. For instance, One Piece's reputation was destroyed thanks to the 4K dub in the West, and it would take a while for its reputation to build back up. These types of people would rather preserve the shows in the original form rather than add them in ways they really don't agree with. Now, with the newfound creativity in it opened up, responses to 4Kids and the practices came flooding out the gates. We're talking rant videos on YouTube, forum discussions on Anime News Network, flash cartoons found on sites like newgrounds.com, and of course, the creation of dozens upon dozens of YTMND websites. But the real granddaddy of these parodies all came from the mind of a certain Englishman.
Little Karibo.
Show, but also took time to satirize elements of the 4Kids dub. But funnily enough, 4Kids themselves were actually big fans of the Abridged series. Take that what you will. But on a slightly less funny note, 4Kids downtrend would continue with the death of the Fox Box. In 2005, the Fox Box was canceled and rebranded as 4Kids TV, where they basically did the exact same stuff. But with their own block on Fox, 4Kids kept on chugging with more shows to come, such as Mew Mew Power, a magical girl show that originally aired in Japan in 2002 under the name Tokyo Mew Mew. Airing over here in 2005, 4Kids licensed this show and a few similar shows, like Magical Do-Re-Mi, in order to broaden the demographic. They thought the shows catered more towards young little boys, and the shows like this would cater to little girls. But the Asian setting proved difficult for the 4Kids staff to translate to a Western audience. Aside from the standard edits of removing religious references, like a cross weapon, and partially revealing transformation sequences, the plot and characters changed around, and some plot-informed snippets were edited out with time, which led to several holes in the story. Mainly because the dubbers wouldn't finish episode, they would write the script before they were done finishing the series. So a character is described as homeless, all of a sudden she's revealed to have a family, and the character's like, well, that's what I heard. Though I'd say, yeah, we didn't get that far before writing the script and dubbing it. Episode 12 was edited to become episode 1, and then it started entirely later on in the show's run. The The writing was full of cat puns, which was comedy, and the biggest difference is changing the show's setting from Tokyo to America, hence the title change, Mew Mew Power, which originally they were going to call it Hollywood Mew Mew, but no one liked that. So 4Kids actually purchased the rights for the first half of the show, with plans to purchase the second half of the show. They would have purchased the second half of the show to be successful. But despite high ratings, the show never got any merchandising deals, which led to 4Kids canceling the show after the first 23 episodes aired. This is actually a common thing with television aimed at younger audiences, as many good shows have gotten canceled due to poor toy sales and no merchandising at all. But to call Mew Mew Power good is a bit of a stretch, as nowadays the show is seen as average. Though if you're still going to watch Mew Mew Power, good luck. The series has never gotten a DVD release in North America, but a DVD of the entire series was released in South Africa. So it's at this point where we face the X. These shows on Saturday mornings, they were starting to falter. The ratings weren't as good as they once were. Children's TV blogs were on a bit of a decline, and 4Kids were losing ratings with the later shows. After all, why would kids get up early on Saturday mornings to watch cartoons when they have the internet, a gateway to tons of content at any time of the day? Okay, so 4Kids' next show is going to collaborate with another popular 80s franchise, G.I. Joe Sigma 6. This show aired in 2005 on both Japanese and US television. Sigma 6 is a reimagining of the G.I. Joe franchise, commissioned by Hasbro itself. The show is animated by Studio Gonzo, and it's basically the 80s cartoon with a new coat of paint and for a new millennium. For instance, planes are destroyed, but maybe everyone's parachuted out so no one dies. Also, one character gets a laser chainsaw. 4Kids seems to like laser chainsaws. So what perfect block to air this show on to 4Kids TV? The show itself is met with mixed reviews from both critics and fans as well. Some think it's so cheesy it's fun, while others think the cheesiness detracts from what could have been an interesting show. Whatever the case, Sigma 6 lasted 2 seasons, ending in 2006. At this point, a major shift was happening with 4Kids. 2005 was the mother of them all. That year saw 4Kids lose the Pokemon license, thereby not allowing them to dub and merchandise any more iterations of the anime. Future handling of the anime and other merchandise would be handled by Pokemon USA Incorporated. This meant the entire cast of the series had to be replaced, despite dubbing still taking place in New York. About enough of all this, it's time for a patriotic break. Okay, I'm going to need everyone to rise up. Rise on the seats.
Oh,
I want you all to place your hand on your chest, your heart, whatever.
No, I remember. No.
You suffer again.
Is there volume?
Hey, quiet.
Got yourself
Welcome to our suffering.
America!
Hooray.
Yeah!
Woo! Woo! USA! 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 That's what our troops died for.
There's nothing more patriotic than a bunch of Japanese
Okay, thanks for being here.
the 4th of July.
So by this point, in the late 2000s, 4Kids have seen a decrease in output. Over the course of 3 years, the 3 biggest shows were Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, right off that Yu-Gi-Oh! License, Chaotix, and Dinosaur Kane, which is basically an attempt to recapture the magic of Pokemon after they lost the license. But 2008 saw some big news. The Kids WB block that helped 4Kids get their start would be shut down, and all in-house programming, like DC cartoons, would be canceled. 4Kids have purchased the rights to the blog. They write owning both the Fox and WB children's blogs until December, Before Kids' contract with Fox expired, leading to the termination of all their Fox shows by the end of the year, and the cancellation of 4Kids TV. But with the Kids WB rights still in hand, 4Kids will push forward, which leads us to CW4Kids. Created in 2008, CW4Kids was the blog that served as a replacement for both Kids WB and 4Kids TV. Airing Saturday mornings on the CW network, which is owned by Warner Brothers, as well as DC shows they are on there. CW4Kids would license and air several cartoons and anime. Though CW would show three kinds of stuff. Shows that were previously on 4Kids TV, like Viva Pinata. Shows that were previously on Kids WB, like The Batman. And Whatever the Hell Robots was. They even aired their own version of Dragon Ball Kai, which the less said about that, the better.
At least they tried.
He's a genie.
He's both.
But it didn't have original content. See, at this point, 4Kids had partnered with Saban, the company behind Power Rangers, to make some shows to the program. The biggest one was this little gem, Kamen Rider Dragon Knight.
Woo!
Aired in 2008, this show was Saban's second attempt to bring the heavily popular Kamen Rider franchise to the West. Saban and 4Kids decided to take a more Power Rangers approach to the franchise. The plot itself is a loose remake of Kamen Rider Yuki, which had debuted in Japan about 6 years prior. But the show did well everywhere in the world, except in America.
Ironic.
And despite that, the show was still canceled at the end of its run. The final 2 episodes weren't even broadcast on TV, they were only on the CW website. But despite all that, the show gained a loyal following among Kamen Rider fans. By now, 4Kids will go through a bit of a rebrand during this time on the CW, which would lead to the creation of Toonzai. Debuted in 2010 after the cancellation of CW4Kids, Toonzai was a Saturday morning block on CW, where epic anime lived. And yes, they finally said anime. Taking the stance as the final form of Kids WB, while openly acknowledging the shows as anime, the Japanese roots after all these years, the block itself was heavily inspired by Toonami, which at this point was still canceled. But despite rebranding, Toonzai disappeared in 2012, with the rights purchased by Saban and turned to Vortex, which also lasted 2 years. But the new decade wouldn't be kind to 4Kids. In 2011, Alpha Khan stepped down as 4Kids CEO, and literally 2 months later, 4Kids was sued by TV Tokyo and Nihon Ad Systems for allegedly making deals with companies like Funimation and Majesco with regards to the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise behind their backs. Supposedly, the deals had it so that 4Kids could collect royalties for themselves, not giving a portion of them to TV Tokyo, hence the lawsuit. As a result of said suit, 4Kids' rights to the Yu-Gi-Oh franchise were terminated, and because of these charges, 4Kids ended up filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy a week later. The rights to Yu-Gi-Oh would be acquired by 4Kids Productions, at this point 4K Media. 4Kids had to auction off several of their shows as a result of the bankruptcy, and in 2012, 4Kids was shut down all the subsidiaries in order to save money. This really was looking to be the end of the company as a whole, taken down by one of the biggest successes, or was it? Back in 2010, 4Kids created the website Toonzaki, a site dedicated to streaming uncut anime, like Fooly Cooly and Fist of the North Star. This is done as a way to make amends with the anime community, deciding to embrace shows that geared toward an older audience with zero changes or cuts. In 2012, 4Kids rebranded themselves as the 4 Licensing Corporation, where they would continue to license various shows. The names were actually look up to the company, as their active building bridges and moving away from what they made them infamous was making them more likable. Until 2014, that is, where Toonzaki went defunct. And in 2016, 4 Licensing filed once again for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, due to not really doing much since its creation. And as of today, that is the end of 4Kids Entertainment, a long sort of legacy ending in November. So what happened afterwards? Well, one, the anime community cheered for the company's demise. Though by that point, they'd done so little since the mid-2000s, there really wasn't much celebrating. 4Kids Productions will become Konami Cross Media NY in 2019, where it deals with the English distribution of not only Yu-Gi-Oh, but several other Konami games and licenses. You know, when he eventually started making those again. But the saddest repercussion was that a lot of New York-based voice actors lost a lot of work. The NY anime dubbing scene had seen a major decline throughout the 2000s, with the death of Central Park Media and the mass downsizing of Media Blasters, making 4Kids the last true company in that city to dub anime. As a result, some voice actors either retired from the industry or moved to Los Angeles or Texas to continue their career, but some continue to thrive on in the Big Apple. 4Kids as a whole left a big impact on as to how anime is perceived in the West. They helped make anime more mainstream and marketable, allowing many to view some that hadn't been seen on TV all that much. And there's even people nostalgic who feel nostalgic over 4Kids shows. Many have fond memories of the handling of Pokemon. The work of Yu-Gi-Oh! Also has a following of those who grew up with it. And even a lesser output like Mew Power helped get those born after Sailor Moon into Magical Girl shows. They were also the last of their kind in many ways. They're one of the last bastions for original Saturday morning programming, but also showed that in the new millennium, the practices of censoring anime for kids was seen as woefully outdated, and nowadays more difficult to achieve in the age of the internet, where one can easily view the original shows in their uncensored glory. Even today, W is taken far more seriously by the business, often favoring faithfulness over marketability. But ultimately, 4Kids is just a face for an old-fashioned business practice, a cog in a machine who had to follow the rules and appeal to the network bigwigs. Besides, this practice still goes on in other countries. Thanks for coming, guys.